Today, on History Hour with Spencer Hardenberg, we have four very special guests. First, we'll talk to Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. Frederick, William, come on. Nice to meet you, William. So, let's see. Frederick, we'll start with you. How about you tell me about your childhood?
I was born into slavery in Talbot County, Maryland, in February 1818. I never knew my father, and I was separated from my mother at a very young age. So I was raised by my grandma, Betty Bailey.
Betty?
At about age 7, I was sold to a man named Hugh Ald in Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, boy. That's tough. William, describe your life and notable childhood experiences to me, please.
I was born December 10th, 1805 in Newburyport, Massachusetts.
Yes.
Due in large measure to the Embargo Act, my father's laziness and his alcohol addiction, he abandoned our family when I was 3 years old and left my mother to take care of us. Terrible. In order to support our family, I sold homemade molasses candy, lemonade, and I would even stack wood.
Wow. Well, okay.
Doesn't even compare to slavery, though, does it?
William, Frederick, both of you seem like very intelligent men.
Of course.
Mostly
William, how are you? Oh, really? Well, I guess we'll find out. How are you educated as a child?
Well, I left my family for 3 years to live with a Baptist deacon who supplied me with a limited education. The basics, you know.
Yes.
Calculating fractions, trigonometry, that good stuff like that.
I got you.
I went back to live with my mother, and I attended school in the town of Newburyport, where I was, of course, born.
Okay.
Also, I worked in an apprenticeship for a print shop,
Okay.
and I self-educated myself there quite a bit.
Okay. Well, that's quite. And now, Frederick, how about you? As a slave, it must have been quite difficult to educate yourself now.
Of course. While in Baltimore with the Alds, my master's wife Sophia began teaching me how to read and write. Eventually, however, because it was illegal to teach a slave how to read and write, I was forced to stop. I continued to educate myself in secret, however, from the neighborhood kids, just reading as much as I could.
Yes.
This education made me realize that knowledge was going to be the key to my freedom and subsequent prosperity.
Okay. Now, William, you're a very accomplished gentleman. What were some of your early accomplishments?
Well, at 13 years old, I took on a 7-year apprenticeship as a writer and editor of the Newbury Herald. After various newspaper jobs, I, along with a friend, started my own newspaper company called Free Press. Unfortunately, this company failed.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I then moved to Boston and landed a very prestigious job for the National Philanthropist, a newspaper dedicated to temperance and reform.
Okay. Now, Frederick, your upbringing sounds quite rough.
Of course.
After all that, how did you end up as a freeman in the Abolitionist movement?
After my stay with Hugh Ald, my master, I was sold quite a few times. Once to a man named William Freeland, and once to a brutal man named Edward Covey.
Oh, I've heard of him.
He's known as a slave breaker.
Yes.
His brutality made me realize that I needed to escape and get my freedom.
Okay, all right. So, Frederick, how were you able to escape the white man?
I tried to escape multiple times, twice I think it was, before I was eventually successful.
Okay.
Finally, on a trip to Baltimore in 1837 with my master, I met the love of my life, Anne Murray.
Lovely lady.
With her help, on September 3rd, 1838, I was able to escape to New York City, free land.
So, William, how does a man like you get involved in the abolitionist movement?
Well, it started in 1828 while working for the National Philanthropist. I took a meeting with the anti-slavery editor of a newspaper called The Genius of Emancipation.
Okay.
This guy's name was Benjamin Lundy.
Hey, I had dinner with him last night, actually.
Ah, great guy.
Good guy.
Lundy brought the cause of abolition to my attention when he offered me an editor's position.
Editor?
Of this amazing newspaper, The Genius of Emancipation,
Okay.
in Vermont. I eagerly took this job.
Of course. Frederick, once you became free, how did you become part of the abolitionist movement?
My wife and I settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts, where I became a licensed preacher. I practiced my oratory skills there. There I subscribed to William's newspaper, The Liberator, and began attending...
Hello, everyone!
This man right here.
Began attending abolitionist meetings.
Yes.
This man really inspired me to become part of the abolitionists.
I still hate you.
Okay, hey, focus.
I wanted to be an
Jesus Christ.
active member. A few days later, I electrified the audience with my first speech in Nantucket. After this, the society asked me to become a permanent lecturer, and I agreed. I was an abolitionist.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, William, writing utensil. Do you consider Mr. Benjamin Lundy as one of your influences for joining the abolitionist movement?
Well, of course. Were you listening to what I just said? Along with him, I also considered Frederick Douglass for 8 years.
Considered until you turned into an idiot.
Okay.
Can you silence him, please?
Shut up.
I considered him for 8 years an influence to me because he inspired the whole black community as a successful runaway slave.
Yeah, I did.
Huh?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, shut your mouth. I'm going to shut it for you. Okay, hey. As a black man speaking out against white men, you must have faced many obstacles, didn't you?
Of course. Being a black man and an abolitionist who still was not free, I obviously faced many obstacles. At several conventions, angry mobs chased me down and they beat me severely.
Oh.
I narrowly escaped with my life quite a few times. Fearing that my newfound publicity would prompt my recapture, I traveled to the United Kingdom, and for 2 years I was a lecturer there. I was dumbfounded by the liberties and freedoms that everyone had there.
Okay.
A few years later, I was notified that a few of my friends had bought my freedom for me. I returned to the United States and I was a free man. It was incredible.
That's amazing. Okay. Now, William, what were some obstacles you had to overcome?
Well, firstly, the poverty I faced during my childhood was a huge obstacle. Also, I had to deal with Southerners condemning my famous newspaper. I'm sure you heard of it, The Liberator.
I have. Yep.
In which advocated the immediate emancipation of slavery. So I lived in fear each day, and I thought I was in danger. I thought I might die because my opinions differed from many Southerners.
The Southerners, they're crazy. Huh?
Maybe.
Next, many abolitionists disagreed with my views, which consist of dissolving the Union, not aligning the Anti-Slavery Society, in which I founded, of course, with a political party, the Constitution being a pro-slavery document, and that women should be able to participate in the Anti-Slavery Society.
Okay, now, Frederick, once you became a free man, what was your role in this movement?
See, upon my return to the United States, I became one of the most prominent voices for the abolitionist movement. At the conventions, I explained the horrors and difficulties that all slaves faced, including myself. I became an idol for my people, and an indomitable voice for the civil rights of all mankind.
Okay, William, sit down.
I also began to realize
Frederick's talking.
that basically everything he stood for was wrong. So,
Okay.
got it.
So, Mr. Garrison, you were very important to the abolitionists now.
I agree.
What role did you play in that movement, and what were some of your more notable accomplishments?
Well, I was known as one of the movement's most radical abolitionists. I approached emancipation in a nonviolent, passive, resistant way. Some of my most notable accomplishments consist of creating the Liberator, organizing the New England Anti-Slavery Society, creating the American Anti-Slavery Society. I also upholded the Liberator for 35 years, writing 1,820 issues. I wrote Thoughts of African Colonization, which further inspired blacks to be an equal voice in society.
No, Phil.
All right, Frederick, notable accomplishments. Go.
Probably my most notable accomplishment was the publication of my narrative, The Narrative of Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, in May 1845.
Yes. If you haven't read that, go to Barnes & Noble right now.
New York
Purchase it.
Times bestseller 2 years in a row.
Great author. Great author.
Well, thank you. This quickly became a bestseller and one of the most notable, influential pieces of literature in the abolitionist movement.
Yes.
Also, when I returned to the United States, I began publishing my newspaper, North Star. This quickly competed with Mr. Garrison over here, his newspaper, The Liberator, and
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
I believe it almost put him out of business.
Oh.
That's what I believe.
Well, okay. And that's where the beef started. That's it, right? Okay. Okay. Now, Frederick, earlier in the show we had a little disagreement, I'll say, between you two. Well, what do you think about your friend William here?
Well, if you asked me that a few years ago, I would have said that Mr. Garrison was a great man. He was intelligent, and brave, a great friend, and a great leader. But all that's changed. Mr. Garrison's too radical. And quite frankly, all of his ideas are as dumb as him.
Oh no, before, I like the way you shaved, really. Makes you look better.
Thanks.
Now, William, what do you think of Mr. Douglas over here?
Well, I don't think about him, but when I do, I think that Frederick Douglass was once a very good friend until he betrayed me.
Betrayed. Oh, that's a good. Now, how did he do that?
Well, first off, he left my newspaper to start his own newspaper, which almost put me out of business.
Yeah, it's because it was
What
better.
a disgrace. Also, he converted to the political abolitionist view that the Constitution could be interpreted as a anti-slavery document, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
So, Frederick, William had a lot to say about you right then, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
What do you have to say back to that?
Mr. Garrison is just mad because I began to think for myself. Garrison believed that the Constitution was pro-slavery and that it must be destroyed along with the Union to end slavery. Absolute baloney. At first I agreed, but then I began to realize that the framers had not intended for the Constitution to allow slavery forever. It was going to come to an end eventually, and that the Constitution could be used as a powerful tool to end slavery. Also, William believed in moral suasion as a means to end slavery. I, however, began to realize that a peaceful end to slavery was never going to work. Violence must be used. So I began to support a civil war, while he still did not.
I agree. Violence must be used.
Mr. Garrison, Frederick over here just said that you did not support the Civil War. Now, is that an accurate statement, or?
That's 100% accurate. I mean, I thought through moral suasion, us Americans would be able to immediately abolish slavery. I don't know what happened to Douglas's point of view. I don't know what happened to you, Douglas. Anyways, until Lincoln put in issue the Emancipation Proclamation, I really didn't support the war, but I was satisfied after that proclamation because it did make slavery illegal, so